sitting here with including us, 5 fabulous witches.
Yes.
And we're going to be just kind of sharing a little bit about
Samhain
and
Halloween.
Samhain and Halloween and all sorts of things. Welcome to the Witchy Wit podcast, where we look at life through a witchy lens. I'm Kimberlyn.
I'm Leilani.
At Witchy Wit, we explore current events,
Ideas,
music and books,
and experiences in ways that recognize energy and life in everybody and everything.
We are both real witches.
And we bring 2 real perspectives through the lens of our different ages,
Races,
and backgrounds.
with a healthy skepticism for what we have been told is true. Our conversations are raw, candid, and vulnerable.
Join us as we cast a spell to uncover what we each know is true in our intuitive, witchy selves.
So we're just going to go around just so you can recognize there's going to be 5 voices. So I'm going to start, even though you probably know mine. I am Kimberlyn, and I identify as a pagan and a witch and a woman.
And I'm Leilani. I identify as a witch, elemental witch, and an energy witch, and I use she/her pronouns.
And I am Maggie, and I identify as a witch and pagan and queer, and I use she/her. And is that everything?
That sounds good to me.
Beautiful.
Okay,
Yeah.
check.
And I am Kimberly. I am a witch, a pagan, and a guardian, and I identify as she/her.
And I'm Kelly. I identify as a Buddhist pagan witch, and I use she/her pronouns. And
That's good.
that's good.
That sounds
I'm an
brilliant.
energy mover.
There we go, an energy mover. Excellent.
Yeah.
So, shall we get started?
Let's do
I
it.
don't know, and we can kind of go back and forth, and I think people will figure out who we are. Let's start with Samhain and Halloween, and maybe how you think about those two, and then we can go from there.
I could start.
Yeah, please.
I have pretty much cut most of Halloween out of my life now. And it's not without a tiny bit of regret. In some ways, I'd like to decorate with lights and stuff in front, but since we don't give out candy on Halloween
never thought of
night,
it that
it
way.
doesn't seem fair to have decorations. And so, but inside the house is highly decorated with a lot of altars, ancestor altars from my family, for beloved dead of the past year, for all the cats that I have known and loved, and I have little angel cats that hang on a tree. And so it's a lot of work setting all of it up, but I really enjoy having it, and it's going to be time to start working on that when I get home after this weekend. Yeah, so it kind of creeps up on me sometimes, but there it is. And I like to have it up for almost all of October, so I have to get on it. I have 2 or 3 large bins of things in storage in the garage.
You live Samhain large.
I live Samhain large.
Okay. Thank you.
So
Thank you, Maggie.
any lights are only in the backyard, which is enclosed. And
Thank you.
Well, we kind of celebrate the whole spectrum at my house. So we have the Halloween decorations up, the pumpkins, and then before we moved into an apartment, we always did our pumpkin carvings together, and that was a real fun thing. I'm a mom. I have a daughter, but she's off at college now. And there's always a big to-do around the costumes, and I always have tons of candy and healthy crap for some people, too, to give out. Usually, and now I put it out, it's already out outside my apartment. There's a big cauldron full of treats for people to pick up. So there's always like those little hints of the witchiness in there, but it's inside where the beloved dead altar is, and which is always I have 2 very irreverent felines. They couldn't care less how sacred my altar is. And so, so keeping one together is sometimes a challenge, but we always do that. And my daughter likes to do all of the baking around Samhain with the, she does the Day of the Dead cakes and the Pandora and the little, I can't remember what they're called, the Irish ones, the cakes with the little seeds and stuff.
Not cross
and cross, So we'll do a lot of that and feast and.
Brilliant. Thank you.
And then we have our very secular day after Halloween tradition where we hit all the Halloween stores and buy stuff on sale.
Yeah. Well, we try to do it all at my house. We're very eclectic. So outside in the yard, it's Halloween. We share with the world. We share with the neighbors. We have a display we put up with 3 witches that we've made and a cauldron in the center. And then inside, it's a lot more sacred. Inside, there's always an altar to my ancestors and my pets that have passed on. And then in the living room, it's all Dios de los Muertos items, even though neither my aunt nor I are Hispanic. It's a lovely tradition. We live in San Antonio. We feel like honoring that is kind of honoring where we live, and so we do a lot of that. It gets covered. And then my favorite tradition is communing and doing silent or dumb suppers. So I always have a place set during October at the table. That's a place that's set for all those who want to come and be. And I try to, throughout the month, when time permits, to make some of the favorite foods of my family that have passed on and honor them in that way.
That's brilliant. I never thought of that.
I never thought about that.
That's wonderful. Yeah. So I do an altar, and I basically to my beloved dead. 20 years ago, I was way into Halloween, and I always got the good candy, and stuff like that. But I think when I moved to San Antonio, some years we'd get no kids, and then a couple of years, people were busing kids into our neighborhood. I'm not quite sure why. I don't know. And I think there was some sort of map or whatever. Anyway, so that's kind of fallen by the wayside for me, and in a way, I've enjoyed that because then I could really focus on the Samhain aspect of it. But I've thought I've done in ritual a dumb supper, but I never thought of keeping my own private dumb supper. So thank you so much for that idea. I love it.
I love Halloween and I love Samhain. So Halloween is really big in my family. We go all out and we decorate. We create a set complete with like a plot line and like decorations. And we are known in the neighborhood because we do it year after year. So people always come by. We've done themes like Hocus Pocus. You did
Angry Birds, I remember.
We did Angry Birds when they were social distancing so we could slingshot candy to people socially distant. And that was really fun.
I was going to ask, how did that slingshotting candy work?
We bought a giant slingshot, and we were all dressed as the Angry Birds, and then we had like little bags of candy that we made, and then we had like a display of the boxes that you destroy, but like that kept people away.
Oh, that's great.
From us, and then we were all the way at the end of the closest to the house, and they were all the way in the street.
Gotcha.
And then we slingshotted candy up to them, and we had like the Angry Birds music playing.
Oh my gosh, that's
so
great.
That was what we did for social distancing. So we're really big into that. But then I also really love Samhain because I love that feeling of being close to my beloved dead. I'm not much for altar building. So maybe if I'm really on my A game, I'll have like a picture out and like some tokens like mementos on a table.
It's so funny that you said that because what I try to do is have things on my altar for my beloved dead. So my mom, and I might have told this story before on the podcast, but my mom, and her friends would get together and play cards and smoke cigarettes and drink whiskey sours. But not, now we fresh squeezed juice and, you grate the thing and that. No, they had these little dried up packets of like a whiskey sour mix, and you shake it down and then you pour it in and you pour it in. So I was looking for that just so I could honor her, because that's how that was good for them. They were fine. And I couldn't find that. So I think a couple of years in a row I got Bailey's... what's the creamy stuff?
Irish cream?
The Bailey's Irish cream. Yeah, and because she also liked that. Did you know that? Okay, I'm just going to say this. Did you know that Bailey's Irish cream, you can open it and it's cream in it, and you don't have to put it in the refrigerator? Yeah. You could just leave it on the altar the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's I don't know.
It'll last for a few months before it sours, yeah.
Oh my God.
Is it the alcohol?
I'm praying that that's what it is, and not like a bunch of preservatives. So other thoughts?
The other thing that I do is I have a large notebook, and I put a list of my beloved dead for the year, and obituaries and newspaper things or whatever. May have 2 or 3 years in it, depending on how many beloved dead there are and how much documentation they provided. Some people I have a lot, articles about them and, various things. And sometimes there's not that much. But I try to have a picture and an obituary or something anyway. And I really enjoy it. It's a very thoughtful, meditative process, putting it together. And, yeah.
And it gives you time to think about them in a really intentional way, right? Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I love that idea. Last year I took a leaf out of your book and started creating one. I thought that was such a beautiful thing that you did, and it is very meditative to start creating that and looking for some articles and just being able to, because there's too many to have on the altar now. And so, yeah, that's lovely.
And another thing that comes to mind is I remember Leilani and I used to do rituals with the teens.
Yes.
For Samhain, and that would be a way of kind of teaching the next generation, how to build a ritual from, calling a circle to, calling the elements and, doing some light deep work, some scrying and things like that, and really getting the idea of the sacredness of things attached to it, and I think that gave it a little bit deeper meaning for them. At the same time, though, it was also very fun and very witchy, so it was not. I just really liked doing that when the girls were younger.
Me too. Yeah, we did like a sugar skull ritual, and I remember we had we scried with
with mirrors. We had dark mirrors, and we were.
Oh, that sounds so much fun!
Yeah, with sugar, and they decorated. We decorated sugar skulls, and it was with women from our circle, and then their daughters or sisters or.
They were mostly,
fun, yeah.
12 to 14, 15, somewhere around there,
Too young to come to all of our rituals, so we did some.
Oh, that's brilliant. So do you mind, I don't know if you care to share, so, these are the rituals that you do now. How did they develop? I know some people, maybe not necessarily in this group, but some people, they had traditions from growing up, Samhain traditions, not necessarily Halloween. But I was wondering if you'd care to share, what drew you to the traditions that you practice now?
Well, the Day of the Dead, the Dias de los Muertos traditions in my household actually started a couple decades ago. I was working part-time for the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in the city where I lived. And the president also ran a couple of other programs and had a lot of folks who had immigrated here from Mexico and were facing this problem where their kids were not getting any of the cultural traditions. And so I was given the job of being the project coordinator to create a tradition. And I'm like, transplant from Rhode Island, I know nothing about this. But when I learned and then started talking to people and doing interviews with people who knew, it was so beautiful and it was so amazing and it touched me so deeply. And then so many of my friends did celebrate it that it was like after learning and being brought in so lovingly, it's like I couldn't let it go. It had to stay with me. It had to be something that I kept doing.
That's brilliant. Yeah. So you kind of learned. I mean, you knew of it, and you did research. Sounds like.
I did research and learned a lot that I did not know. And then what really touched me was one woman who didn't speak any English, and at the time I didn't speak any Spanish, decided she was going to cook the meal. And she was a lovely older woman from Oaxaca. So I go to her house and pick her up. We did everything with sign language and pointing, and I take her to the grocery store, and she taught me how to make mole. And it was so, I mean, it was the most magical. You know, she had candles burning, and then there was smoke, and there were faces in the smoke that I was seeing, and it was just amazing. So it was like mentally I researched it first, but then having that experience and then talking to so many people about their childhood and their memories and how this was what happened when they were younger, but now it wasn't happening in the town I lived in. There just wasn't a huge Hispanic community, right? It was very small. And so it touched me dearly. And it was, I want to say that was probably when I started thinking about Samhain, because the meaning it had as Dios de los Muertos, the meaning and the traditions and the honoring the beloved, that touched me. Before that, it was kind of like, well, it's Halloween, and I know it's Samhain, but it's Halloween. That kind of overshadowed it in my childhood, in my upbringing, right? So, yeah, I think that kind of opened the door for me to really start thinking about the meaning of Samhain and start bringing some of these other pagan traditions in as well.
Brilliant.
We celebrated Halloween growing up, but there wasn't any hint of anything, any Samhain part to it at all. And the reason that, and turn off the lights and don't answer the door it isn't just that we're meanies that don't want to give out candy. But, my wife and I do a ritual, a particular ritual we've been doing ever since we got together on Halloween night. That started, well, for many years I was part of a group that had a public ritual on Halloween night.
I remember, yeah.
And then after I stopped doing that, the next Samhain, I was asked to marry a couple in Austin on that night. So we went and did that. And then after that, I figured, well, I need to figure out something else to do. And it just felt right to transition to doing a little private ritual.
Right.
Feels very sweet.
It was just Halloween when I was a kid. I'd never heard of Samhain until I was older, and I'm guessing it was mostly media that I first, learned about that. And of course, I went to college in San Antonio, so I started learning about Dia de los Muertos, which is weird because I never learned about that in Corpus Christi, which is also where I grew up, which is also a very heavily Hispanic community, but also not segregated legally, but still a very separate community in Corpus Christi, like at least when I was a child there. But I think it's really interesting though, seeing how my daughter has kept that, like she'll call me up from college or send me okay, she doesn't call me, she sends me a text.
Right,
let's be very honest here. She does not call me. She texts me or sends me an Instagram chat.
Who calls?
But she'll say like, oh, I'm taking a group into the woods and we're going to do our ritual, and she'll ask me a couple of questions, or she'll be like, usually it's more about fire safety. But,
good.
The apple does not far fall from the tree when it comes to the need for fire safety. But it's kind of interesting to see that she's taking that, even though she's not still at home and like trapped in what I've planned for her kind of thing. So that's been kind of cool.
I can imagine. Right?
Yeah. I think I grew up doing the very secular Halloween, and I really didn't. I started practicing as a witch when I was in college, but it wasn't until I was in San Antonio and a part of our circle that I really started to understand, from my perspective, this idea that Samhain is an extra special chance to connect with those who came before in a way that I haven't ever really felt that connected to ancestry. So it was this really interesting opportunity to remember those who came before, not only my ancestors of blood, but ancestors of a lot of things, like the ancestors of the craft, or ancestors of justice, or just anything like that which makes me feel more rooted and connected than I have otherwise. My family is not very big, and we don't really know a lot of our ancestors in that way, or I don't really feel connected to my family in an ancestral way. So it was a different way for me to connect to the beloved dead.
That's a really good point when you mention your own family and your connection, because I did kind of do something. I mean, separate from Halloween, because I was heavily involved with the Episcopal Church, and so they do, like, there's All Hallows Eve, and then there's All Souls Day, which is, and so I kind of did a highly Christian version of that, and but I did do some silence and things like that, so it was kind of my own little meditative version of that, and didn't really do much with that, even with Samhain, because I kind of felt the same way you did, Leilani, about that kind of disconnection. My thinking is that I'm pretty sure my great-grandmother, from Mount Olive Baptist Church, would probably, go and screaming in the opposite direction if I sent out, come across the veil and talk to me or something, so that was not something that I felt my lineage would participate with me in, until we started doing some work, the priestessing apprenticeship, where they were talking about this idea of your ancestors of craft, or your ancestors, so not of blood, but your ancestors of spirit, and that opened it up really. I mean, it opened it up a lot for me, and then also recognizing that, like I have a little memento of one of my pets, one of my dogs, and so opening it up so it doesn't have to be an ancestor. Like, I had this really blinkered view of what this was supposed to be. It has to be an ancestor and blah 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 blah. And then once I opened that up, it became so much more meaningful for me, Samhain. And then my altar kind of reflects a little bit of the influence of being in San Antonio with the Dia de los Muertos, and so that has helped as well.
I do want to point out that, so my grandmother is the main piece of my beloved dead, air quotes, altar, because it's not very altar-y, but cause I just don't like a lot of stuff, but I have like this picture of her hand. So she's on my altar, and she was super Christian. And when she passed, I felt like all bets were off with her Christianity, because I felt like when she crossed the veil, she was like cool with whatever. For me, I'm not disagreeing with you, but for me, I was like, she's like, I never came out of the broom closet to her, but she never asked.
I never thought of it that way.
But for me, like, the moment that she crossed over, I was like, now she's like all of these earthly things that bind us, she's freed from. So I know in my mind, she now can see into my heart, and the title of me being a witch does not deter her, because she doesn't have these earthly things that bind her from seeing the truth of love.
You can just, I was going to say, you can just have the love and not all of the labels, and that's a beautiful way of thinking about that, and I'm going to have to give that some thought. I really appreciate it.
I definitely am not saying that's true for everyone, or everyone should practice that way, but for me, I was like, cool, like, Grams is in on this now, like, let's go.
Yeah. I'm going to think that. I really love that. Thank you.
Because I also do a tarot reading, a big tarot reading for the year on Halloween night. So.
Okay, that brings up another question. So I'd love to get your thinking on this. Is Samhain the beginning of your year?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the end of my year, but it's not the beginning. I have an in-between time. And so for me, Samhain is the end of the year, and it isn't until I'm on the other side of Yule that my year begins. And then in Yule, I do an all-night vigil, because that's when my year is beginning.
Whoa.
And everything that's in between is about sitting and honoring and being still.
I love that. That's fabulous.
You too?
I do the same thing.
Cool.
Samhain's my end of the year, and winter solstice is my beginning. And that's just and there's just this in between. It's like, I guess, fallow or
Really rich.
and usually that's where I'm kind of like with Samhain. I the veil's thin, and I kind of do a lot of that magical work there, and then I spend those next months kind of contemplating and thinking and a lot of meditating, and then at winter solstice, my bestie, who's also a fellow witch, and I tend to do what's called a sumble for our year, and that's where we also set our projections for the next year.
That's phenomenal. I'm gonna get this some. This is wonderful. Thank you.
I really love that because my impression of being a witch is that there is like we are more open to sitting in that liminal space and like doing that work in there instead of like closing the book and opening the next one. Like we can hold that.
Yeah, and I think just in the lifestyle that I have, like there's nothing else in my life that ever allows for like a rest, for a stopping and a contemplating. Work just keeps going, the kid keeps going, and the relationships keep going. But that's a space where it's like, no, this is my time spiritually. That I'm going to let these things sit and contemplate these things. I might still be getting up and going to work and doing all the mundane things, but I'm that's what's going on in the head space, in the heart space.
What I find fascinating about that is that you have like this period of quiet when the rest of the world is getting crazy, right? Getting super busy and just going the Halloween from not really Halloween, I don't know, maybe but I always think of from Thanksgiving to Christmas is like this really mad dash everywhere, and so you're actually going in the opposite direction. It's
really nice. Although sometimes it's a problem because I can't always even force myself to do the performative things that are expected. Like, there's this party and it's like, no, I'm thinking about stuff. I've already got an obligation, which is, and then they're like, didn't you stay home?
Yeah, that was my obligation.
That was my obligation to me, yes.
That's brilliant.
I think that's interesting that we've never talked about that, but we did the same thing.
I had no idea.
Bestie and I did, but I didn't know that you also did that.
That is so cool, yeah. And it is challenging because the rest of the world is go, go, go. And for a long time, I was trying to do both. I would have the facade of go, go, go at work and out in the world and do things for people. And then I would carve my 2-3 days a week that were for me to rest. And at some point, I know when it's actually when my mother transitioned, because I didn't have to go out of state to visit the family for the holidays, that I was able to give myself permission to just rest. And of course I was grieving that particular year, so it was like, I'm just not going to get caught up in this. This is my time. This is what I believe. This is what I'm going to do. And it felt so right. And I was like, I'm doing this from now on. I'm not going to get sucked up with the whole crazy go, go, go. And it offends some people. A lot of my Muggle friends are very offended that I'm, especially when you get close to Thanksgiving. From Thanksgiving to the Christmas time, it's like, but we need to get together and we need to do this before. And I'm always like, hey, how about after the holidays? Why don't we, New Year's, after you've done the whole crazy bit? Like, I'm just like, no, I'm not gonna run. Yeah,
no, I'm not gonna bake one damn cookie. The big the cookie gift.
I'm not doing it. Well, and I don't know in that time period. I don't know if it's the same for you, because I know one of the things. So with the Sumble, it's an experience where we honor our teachers, we honor whatever goddess we've been working with, or idea. Sometimes it's it's an idea, not necessarily like justice, as opposed to necessarily like Freya. And then our teachers, and then we have boast, where we brag about the things that we've done, which is a very awesome thing. If you've never tried it, I highly recommend that, because you get to. I think in our society we're not supposed to honor the things that we did or brag about ourselves, and I think it's kind of nice to acknowledge those things that we did. And then there's the oaths, the this year I'm going to do this, this year I'm going to do that, and I never know in this kind of time between Samhain and when something's going to hit me. I'll be sitting there for days on end going, man, I got to get this ready, or I'm going to let down the bestie at the Sumble, and then I'll just be sitting there something like, oh. And now I'm writing for the next 2 hours or 3 hours or who knows, or just sitting and thinking, and so I don't really know when those things are going to pop up. So it's really hard to be as available as people sometimes want.
That makes sense
in that period.
So something that I'm hearing that I think is really interesting is this personal practice that is very important, but how it clashes with the overculture. And then because of that, the maybe the pressures that are put or the expectations that are not met, and then the onus of the boundaries that have to be kept.
But it sounds like it's so totally worth it. I mean,
it is.
Yeah. I mean, that you've given me a lot to think. Everybody's given me a lot to think about. So I think this is going to be a different Samhain for me.
Do you know when my year begins and ends?
Oh yeah. When does your year begin and end?
August and May.
Well, yeah.
I feel that as well.
Yes.
It's an academic year.
Yes.
Yes, I live in academic years too.
Yeah.
It's so funny because for me, I've spent pretty much all of my life with that kind of, even after I graduated from college, I went to grad school and then I teach and all that kind of stuff. So it's still my, and Samhain kind of falls in the middle.
So I feel like I'm swimming against the tide, like trying to remember that I just have so much of that outside pressure that's the beginning and the end, and then I'm like, no, it's not, but it feels like a tiny voice in like a rough sea of crashing waves.
Yeah.
For me, it almost feels like a split of two lives, like because the academic calendar is definitely my Muggle life, and it's frequently at odds with my life, and the life that I hold on to as dear. And it's interesting to watch those things play together and also play with the idea that, well, it's actually all my life, right?
Right.
And I chose it. But it's an interesting, I guess, dichotomy, if that's the right word, to deal with those things where, the year is like, it's harvest.
Yes.
So.
And I think some of it too, it's different. I feel more Samhain-y when I'm back on the East Coast than I do here, only because it's colder, and it's darker. And it's dark by 4:30, so you really feel it. And if you went trick or treating, it's like they say, you can go right after school because it's dark. So it's a different feel here. And what were you saying?
The leaves.
And the leaves, yes, the leaves change. So you get a sense of moving towards that time of the year that I don't. It's a little hard to capture here, a little harder to capture here. But I think because of the traditions like the Dia de los Muertos, that we, there are aspects that can kind of get us primed. Yeah.
Yeah. It is hard trick or treating and stuff like when it's 90 degrees.
Oh my gosh! I think we were talking earlier today about back when I lived in New Jersey. When I went trick or treating, we would be wearing heavy winter coats and then put our costumes on top because it was that cold.
Yeah.
See, we'd have those horrible plastic store-bought costumes on that clung to our sweaty skin. We couldn't breathe in the little plastic mask.
Yeah.
But we wore them.
Yeah, we got our candy. That's right.
So, but I was going to ask y'all, what do you think about, for you personally, what about dressing up for Halloween? Is that something that you do, don't do, feel drawn to, avoid?
So it was funny back in my Christian days, because the image I had in my head was that this was this pagan thing where people dressed up so that they could frighten away the spirits and blah, 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 blah. And I don't have to worry about frightening away spirits. So that was, so I'm not going to dress up. But then I'd have more playful moments where it's like, this is the only chance I get to wear stuff that I, whatever. So I kind of go back and forth. Now I like to do go witch heavy. So I think there's a mutual friend that we have that used to have a witch's tea. And so I love that idea. So I try when I'm going to be home on Halloween. I kind of do the same thing that you do, Maggie, because I don't want to be disturbed. So I turn off my lights and sit in the back of the house so no one thinks I'm home. But then I can kind of dress up and have my, my little ritual. And so, yeah, so I do dress up now, but maybe not trick or treaty dressing up.
Yeah.
And we know you dress up.
But I dress up all year long.
Yeah.
Like I dress up in any opportunity to wear a wig or jewels on my face or a costume. So this is just a great opportunity. But I do see Halloween and Samhain as totally separate. For me, it's just a coincidence that they occur similarly.
Yeah, so I have no opposition to dressing up for anything whatsoever. And, and in my department at work, sometimes they'll decide there's a theme and we're all going to dress up according to this. Like, we're all going to do Firefly or we're all going to do Rocky Horror or whatever. Well, we were going to do Rocky Horror and that got nixed by them. Because they were like, this is a workplace. But fair. But they'll come up with different themes and I'll participate or, so like that. But I similarly, the Halloween and the Samhain thing are so separate for me that even though they're at the same time, like, yeah, sure, we're having a party, I'll go and I'll dress up. And if we're not, okay.
That makes sense. What about you?
It keeps evolving for me. When I was a newbie witch for a very long time, for many years, I was very committed to this idea that if it's the beginning of a new year, then I need to dress up as something I want to bring into the new year. I can't do something that's going to bring in energy that I don't want. I don't care if it's in fun. I can't do that. So I would do these things that could cross over. Okay, I'm going to dress up like Amaterasu, the sun goddess, but everyone else thinks I'm a geisha. I would try to find these walk the lines. But what usually happened was nobody knew what I was. I'm dressing up in honor of Freya, and they're like, "What are you?" I'm a Valkyrie, and they're like, "A what?" Okay, so so that worked for a while, but it was also a lot of work to try to think of okay, how am I going to walk this double line? So I kind of let the Muggle I need to dress up go and didn't for a long time, and that didn't feel right either. Because everyone else is having fun, and this was our holiday first, by golly. So then I started dressing up for the last, 10 years. I usually dress up. I do a lot of the skeleton skull because Dios de los Muertos, a lot of people will. And that's, I realize, a commercialization of the sacred day, but there's a lot of that, bringing that up and kind of honoring the fact that someday I'm going to die. I'm honoring my ancestors, and someday I'm going to join them, and this is something to celebrate and not fear. And that has felt right for a long time. But I really think this year I'm going to dress up like a witch. It's why do I need to dress up as something else? I'm just going to be me, and I'm going to go witchy town, right? So I'm on the search right now for a really cool hat that I can deck out, and that will become the annual. That's what I'm going to wear for the week of Samhain.
We'll hook you. We have a couple of suggestions.
All right, cool beans.
I do really love that this is the time of year where we do get to dress up like witches, and it's just accepted.
I can't remember who it was, but someone said, this is the only time I could really be myself.
Yeah.
So, yes. So, shall we thank them?
Yeah, I have
okay. Sure, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us today. I thought as a way of a checking out, we could maybe go around and say our favorite Halloween costume that we've ever dressed up as.
Okay.
I'll go first. Black outfit Sandy from Grease.
Ooh.
Complete with a blonde, curled wig and red heels. I felt so sassy.
Okay, this was not the stretch that it might seem, because I had all of the stuff in my wardrobe, but I went as a dominatrix.
Ooh.
Yes. And I felt so good walking the streets dressed like a dominatrix. So.
You walked the streets?
I mean, I didn't walk the streets like walking. I meant I was going somewhere dressed as a dominatrix, and no one batted an eye. Or maybe they did, but I don't know. But
I'm trying to think, and I'm having such a hard time because most of the time I end up doing whatever my daughter tells me to, which sounds really sad, but it's true. She's very creative, though, and her ideas tend to be really good, so it's been... I remember we went as cats together a couple of times.
Ooh.
And, a couple of times I was like her cat so she could be the witch, or the...
You're such a good mom. and such a good sport.
I just roll with it.
Yeah.
And I've always had fun doing steampunk costumes for some reason, because there's so much to play with. That's always been a fun one, when I get to make my own choices, or start with my own choice and then have it edited by my daughter.
Who has a great artistic eye.
Yeah.
I think it was the time I dressed up as a geisha. So I'm not crafty by choice. Not because I can't be, but by choice. I'm not crafty, and sewing and all that's not my thing. So there was a costume contest at work, and I pinned together the most amazing, I mean, literally, it was, I don't know how many boxes of pins I went through. It was amazing until I realized I couldn't sit down and drive. So I got somebody to drive me, and I laid in the back seat. I won first prize, by the way. But yeah, that was like the best. I looked fabulous, but afterwards I decided I needed to be a little less complicated and do things that didn't require so many pins.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's amazing.
Well, I think it's probably Lady Liberty. I came back from a library meeting in New York right around just before July 4th, and I had the foam crown and torch. So all it took from there was a nicely draped sheet that I dyed a light green.
Very nicely done.
Yes.
I would like Lady Liberty to have your traits.
No, yes.
That's the type of liberty that I would like.
From your mouth to Goddess's ear. Well, thank you all so very much. This was very impromptu. We're all here out for the weekend, having fun and doing some work for our circle. And so we just kind of decided this, last minute. But we really appreciate your sharing your experiences, both with Samhain and Halloween. Thank you so much. Would you just like to say goodbye?
Goodbye. Thank you so much.
We hope you have enjoyed the magic that has unfolded here at Witchy Wit.
It would be great if you would help make Witchy Wit possible and get access to exclusive content by donating on Patreon.
We'd love it if you join our Witchy community and enjoy shareable content on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
Would you do us a big favor and support us by rating and reviewing us wherever you get your podcasts? It's free and helps witchy folks find us.
Feel free to email us at witchywitpodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from our community. Reach out and let us know what's brewing in your cauldron.
New episodes are released every second and fourth Friday. Follow us on your favorite podcasting platform so our episodes go right to your playlist. You can listen as you ride your broom.
Stay witchy, y'all!